We went to France that one time before. Remember we went to France?
There was a World Cup. It happened.
And I'm going to tease something here.
Okay.
Right? When we went to that World Cup,
Yeah.
do you remember that time when I had a load of cereal? Remember the cereal I had? I had like Cookie Crisp cereal when we were in Lyon.
Oh, yeah,
I lived off Cookie Crisp cereal for like a week. Yeah. Do you remember the noise that was made when I put the Cookie Crisp cereal into my mouth in France?
Vaguely.
You could describe it as Le Crunch.
You could. The more interesting story about that is what we picked up at the same time that we put the Cookie Crunch, but we'll save that for later.
Yes. Yeah, that was good.
So there is a game of rugby coming up this weekend.
Yeah.
It is being played, if you're in the UC or the island, 4:45 p.m. Other countries may vary.
Thank you for asking me to do the intro of this one. This has gone well. England v France.
Yes.
This is very exciting.
Yes.
Because France are France. They have
That's correct.
the most phenomenally batshit team that exists. And England, it's hard to tell whether they've got so unbelievably up for it or they've crapped their pants. It's one or the other, and I can't figure out which.
Yeah. If we look at the last couple of years, so last year, England went over to France. The game was in Marseille or Lille, and they were great. They were really good. And they scored. George Ford kicks an incredible conversion to win it right at the end, only for, with like 10 seconds to go, Tomo Ramos to knock over a penalty rather from his own half and actually win it. And you kind of felt for England a little bit of going like, well, they did everything they needed to there. And obviously the English press now takes that as this is the worst thing to ever happen because they lost the game in the last minute.
Yeah.
As has happened countless times since. England broadly have been an incredibly good team who keep putting in fights and keep being narrowly on the losing side of these like 50-50 results that could go either way, and they've just been consistently falling against them. Part of that, I think, is game management, as we talked about. Part of that is just experience and learning to win them. Part of that, you've got to ask questions of, is there a fitness element? I'm not sure, but Alan Walters did leave. Is there something on that side of the way they're conditioned? I don't know. Or is it just, and I think this is a big part of it, is are they not scoring enough points whilst they're on top? And England were absolutely brilliant for an hour against, well, they were absolutely brilliant for 50 minutes and they were very good for about an hour against Ireland, and yet they only scored 10 points.
Yeah.
And obviously they got those 2 extra tries right at the death, but that was kind of after Ireland had switched off a little bit. So I think there is a realistic issue with England that they're not scoring enough points when they're on top. But if I was an England fan, and I had this conversation with an England fan earlier today, you should be encouraged by the performances because they're doing most of it right. You know,
Sure.
It's just the actual like the final points. If it takes, you know, if there's like 100 things you've got to do to win games, England are doing like 97 of them. Just the 3 they're missing are maybe the most important ones.
I was going to say you wouldn't wish it on your worst enemy to play Ireland and France first 2 games up. But we're wishing it on England here because it's what they've got. No, that's a really difficult thing to know how to base whether or not your kind of strategy is working, you know, because that Ireland team, they are utterly ruthless and we saw that last week. This France team kind of rip up the rule book a little bit, you know, that there can be certain things that will like work against most of the teams that might not work against France.
Yeah.
I think the first one that we have to talk about, we spoke about it a lot in the video that's freshly gone out on the England-Ireland game, is the hammer defence.
Yes.
And if you put that up against the French attack, which is either you bomb it in behind and then see what happens, what space opens up there. They're slightly straying slightly away from that, I think, at the moment, and keeping a little bit more ball in hand.
Yeah.
And it is like extremely fast, and then only wide to wide when that becomes really like obviously on. But they're extremely fast, and they're really happy to use their forwards to create that space.
Everyone is keeping more ball in hand, and France have followed that trend.
Yeah.
It's something Galtier is very big on. He is a guy who is fundamentally a poet, where Steve Borthwick is a data guy. He's a mathematician, right? But Galtier's whole thing is he will go, okay, I'm going to read every single piece of data out there. I'm going to read every piece of research. And then what I'm going to do is make it up myself. Yeah. You know, I'm going to write a symphony on the basis of this science I just read. And that is his whole approach to rugby. And so everything is very loose and very improvisational, and they want players doing things, but all that is based on core ideas. So how often France kick the ball is very much based on trends of who's winning at the time. And whether they play to width or narrow, is based on what teams are winning at the time. However, within that, he gives the players an awful lot of room for freedom of expression.
Yes.
And so that allows the best to be got out of Antoine Dupont, out of Tomo Ramos, out of Roman Antomac, obviously playing this weekend, so Matthew Jalabert, and out of the returning Damien Penaud.
Yes, I was going to say the forward pack always going for those pick and goes.
Yeah.
Whenever the ball is there, just pick it up and fucking run into somebody.
Yeah,
you know what I'm saying all the time. So with the hammer defence as opposed to the French attack, I want to talk about this, start out and then bring it inwards, because there's a lot to talk about here. First and foremost, Damien Penaud and Louis Bielbiaré,
Yep.
two of the best wingers in the world, if not the two best wingers in the world.
There's an argument. They're certainly the two best in European rugby this season.
Absolutely.
Both playing at the same club, both playing for now the same national team.
Yes. Now, the thing with the hammer defence that we're seeing at the moment,
Huge
if you
apologies
slip
to Luke
off...
Morgan, by the way.
Sorry?
Huge apologies to Luke Morgan, by the way.
Yes. The thing with the hammer defence is, if you slip off a tackle or you're a non-dominant in a single tackle, you're toast. You're done. You're gone on the outside, somebody will flood through and they will score. It happened with Jameson Gibson Park on the weekend, right? Imagine what will happen with Louis Bielbiaré and Damien Penaud. Now, we can sit here and organise and talk about the strategy of attack and really analyse that as much as we want, right? Sometimes rugby is as simple, and you've got some theories about this that you'll bring up at some point. Sometimes rugby is as simple as, we have Louis Bielbiaré on the wing, give him the ball. We have Damien Penaud on the wing, give him the ball. See what happens, right? Because we can't predict what's going to happen, right? So from an English perspective, how the hell do you stop them? Is it a case of stopping the ball from getting to them in the first place? Can you do that for both wingers? Is that even possible? What do you reckon?
I think we'll get into this down the line on, I want to do something maybe on the trends of the Six Nations so far once we've got a bit more tape to look at, because obviously we've only got 3 games, plus the Rugby World Championship, where I think there are some of the same trends visible, and a little bit in the European Cup. But on the basis of what we're seeing in international rugby so far, after 3 games in 2025, I kind of want to predict Damien Penaud as World Player of the Year this year.
Okay.
I think the game is currently looking incredibly set up for someone like him. All of his skill sets line up perfectly to the player that is most valuable at the minute in 2025. That he is impossibly slippy, as we talked about before. 2023, he broke more tackles than he got tackled. And I think at the minute he's sitting at 47% in club rugby at the minute. He's scored more tries than he's played in games this season. I think he's 15 from 11 games, which is absurd. The last game he played, he scored 6 tries. He's on the most absurd form imaginable.
6 tries from 10 touches of the ball, by the way.
With 2 assists.
2 assists.
2 assists in there as well. He is the most creative winger. I've talked about it since he first broke through, that he plays wing with the mindset of a fly half. He plays like a guy who could be in the middle controlling the game, but he'd rather hang about on the wing and score the odd try. But he reads the game so well. He could play 10 at club level if he, went and was asked to do so. And I think that combination of him coming in and acting as a playmaker, which we sometimes see him do, some do more and more, a couple of games he's played in the autumn, and we've seen him doing a lot of Bordeaux lately, is invaluable. But particularly what he can do when he gets the ball in the tiniest bit of space. You give him any more space than between these 2 chairs, and there's a good chance he breaks through and scores.
100%.
Where Bielbiaré maybe needs slightly more space than that, but he can turn the most hopeless situation from any range on the pitch into a try.
And it's any space in behind. It's the role of the fullback that's so important, especially on the left-hand side where Biaré plays, because, we've often seen that the fullback comes a little bit more into the line, right? Yeah. Louis Bielbiaré scores the majority of his tries from kicks that he's put in himself to chase. Because he's elusive on that. He never gets tackled. He never opts for the kick close enough to the line that somebody can take him out the game.
Yeah.
Right? He always gives himself enough room to go for that and scores off it the majority of the time. So England need to be really, really cautious. Marcus Smith in particular playing at fullback.
This is the issue, isn't it? So the England selection, they've gone for Finn Smith at 10, who is starting a test match for the first time, which is a huge call on its own. But they've also gone for, and I think this is actually a bigger call,
I agree,
Marcus Smith at fullback. Now, when he moved to fullback for the last 15 minutes against Ireland, Jack Crowley caught him out at least twice, being out of position. Well, once out of position, once from a high ball. They were able to exploit him because he is short. So what we like about Marcus Smith, so many great attributes, and he is good under the high ball, but he isn't that tall. I think a big part of Borthwick's thinking here is that France don't kick contestable as much as other teams. They tend to kick long, and that gives you a chance to counter-attack. So he's probably gone, this is why the game is going for it. But they probably still think they can target Bielbarré in return using Tommy Freeman, who's brilliant under the high ball, on that wing, opposite Bielbarré. However, Marcus Smith feels like a tactical decision based on how France kick. But if France adapt their kicking at all, England are kind of screwed.
Yeah.
They've kind of gone like all or nothing here. And also, Marcus Smith is rapid and is quicker than Freddie Stewart. But is he going to, as someone that isn't positionally, knows that fullback space inside out, going to be there to cover every kick that we see put in for or by Beat?
I have absolutely no doubt that Finn Smith's a good enough game manager that he can step up to international level in jersey. Like, he's 100%.
We've seen him do it up to the highest possible levels in club program.
Absolutely. I have no doubt he's going to have an absolutely brilliant game, and he deserves to have a start. Like, good for him. But yeah, that fullback berth really does concern me a little bit. That don't get me wrong, like, on the alternatives, there's been a lot of criticism around Freddie Stewart's tackling from the back when you've got Damien Penaud opposite. It's kind of an unsolvable conundrum in that sense, right? So, as I say, I'm going to bring it in, squeeze it in a little bit, okay? So, the combination of Barassi and Moefana, honestly, I am quite comfortable with the fact that England will probably be able to contain them to a degree, right? That they're going to play very well, the pair of them, but England, I'm not worried from their perspective about those two as much as they're both outstanding players. Mathieu Jalibert coming in at number 10. Now, this is a really interesting one.
It is.
Because with an aggressive D, Jalibert loves a crossfield kick.
Loves a chip.
Loves a chip over for himself or for his centres to chase. And he loves like a little sidestep or a dump-off ball to a forward. Anything sort of out of the box like that, where he goes against potentially what the game plan, the attacking structure is telling him to do. Where sometimes, as I say, he rips up the rule book a little bit, goes back towards the breakdown, sees what space is up there, right? Again, if this defence isn't flawless, if there's any 10 in the Six Nations who is primed to make the most of that, it is Mathieu Jalibert.
So, in the autumn, with Ntamack also unavailable, France went for Thomas Ramos at 10. And I think him playing fullback instead here suggests, to me at least, that we are potentially looking at France, wanting a second first receiver against that really aggressive defence. They probably want to split it down the middle, split the ruck, have one on either side, or that they could just have someone to organise a second wave so they can get outside that first wave of like really aggressive defence. They need a second receiver here, so they don't want to bring in, either move Beat to fullback or bring in a Barré or someone at fullback or Burros, but they've gone for Ramos, right? They want Ramos there. Like, him being at 15 is critical to how they want to attack. It also, though, is interesting because Jalibert likes the ball to come in and out of his own hands much more than Ntamack. Ntamack is incredibly patient. It's something I love about him. Is the fact that he doesn't necessarily want the ball all the time. He doesn't want the ball if he doesn't think there's something on that he can add value to himself. And so we see him a lot not touch the ball. He didn't touch the ball that much against Wales. It just didn't come his way because he didn't want it, because he was just comfortable waiting and letting the forward do their thing, or letting Dupont run the game, or letting Ramos come in and give the pass. And that is like absolutely to his credit. Jalibert likes to have the ball in and out of his hands, and that gives England a focal point to focus their defence on, to attack him much more.
I think he'll really work slotting into that second first receiver role. That if they play off Ramos as the 10, and in behind the second pod they have Jalibert playing out the back there, I think that will really work. But as you say, if England just have their eyes on him all the time, they might get a couple of big shots on him. However, right, I'm not going to move to the main man just yet. As we move slightly further inwards, I think it's important to address this pick and go game around the breakdown. The thing about pick and go is you're literally picking the ball up an inch out from where the gain line is, okay? Which means you can't apply line speed, okay? You just need to be low enough that you can get physically good shoulder, good contact on your opposite man, right? How easy or difficult will it be for England to shut this down? Do you think they'll have a contingency plan in place? Do you think Joel Abd will have primed them for this all week?
I think they've got to. I think the contingency plan is called Ellis Genge.
Okay.
I think Genge is, if you watch him closely, he's one of the best in the world at stopping a pick and drive. He's so good at managing to get momentum from a very short distance. Like, from the distance we are apart, he can get enough momentum up to smash people in the other way, wherever people need 5 or 10 metres to build up. It's interesting in the back row they've selected, in that they've gone for Tom Willis at number 8, Ben Earl at number 7, having been at number 8 pretty consistently since Steve Borthwick came in, and then Tom Curry at number 6. That is 3 jackling options. That is also 3 incredibly physical lads. Like, they haven't gone for a workhorse. They've gone for 3 guys that can stop you on the gain line and then our jackal threats.
Willis is a seriously dominant tackler as well.
First start for England again. They've got 2 players making their first start, which is bold. But
they're both good enough, though. They're both ridiculously good.
But that back row feels selected with France in mind.
Yeah.
I did.
It's a
wonder
Willis
little bit,
v Aldrete thing, isn't it?
Yeah, but Willis being someone that can disrupt that pick and go game, potentially get a shot in that can slow the ball down and potentially get over it as well. It's really interesting. As is Tom Curry isn't necessarily going to be the guy who stops it dead in the gain line, but he can slow that ball down enormously. I thought he was outstanding against Ireland.
Agreed.
Watching him back a second time, I was like, oh God, he was incredible.
Yeah.
He was just absolutely brilliant. And it kind of feels like the game where they'd want Sam Underhill.
Yeah.
He is missing because he would have been the guy for that.
Yeah.
But George Martin can do that job for sort of 50 odd minutes. And then Ollie Chesham is solid. I wondered if Chesham might come in to help with the line out a little bit. Ireland were really able to target Itoje at the line out. And perhaps you bring Chesham in to lighten that fear a little bit. That isn't the way they've gone. They've gone very much in the opposite direction and kept Chesham on the bench. But it just shows they're prioritising the defence, I think, above everything else. England want to be a defensive team who smashes people backwards, and then you kind of graft an attack onto that. The attack feels very, very built on Marcus Smith over the last kind of 4 or 5 games they've played. So it'll be interesting to see how they go with those 2 Northampton halfbacks together, and whether they look to try and play it with 2 players who go at club level, plus the 2 wingers who are used to playing together at club level for that same team in Northampton, whether they try and play more like the Northampton attack, which is a bit more instinctive.
And it is important to say that Ollie Slightham is a player with that bullshit factor.
Yeah.
That he is one of those players who breaks tackles. Again, similar to Biel Biarre, scores tries off that little grubber kick. He loves doing that for himself. And every time you look at him shaping to do it, you're like, why the hell is he doing? Oh, he scored. Never mind. So the big one, right? We've talked about that. And I agree very much with your answer. They are going to have to put a lot of resources into that pick and drive game around France because they're so good at it and it's so quick. When somebody like Genge is on the floor, they will just go again. They'll go, I don't care that we've gone backwards, we're just going to go forwards now, right? With that in mind, okay, so there's a world in which the hammer defence is this genius ploy that keeps the man in the middle quiet, right? But there's also a very realistic world where they look extremely silly for attempting to so heavily and individually, because there's a lot of individual onus on tacklers to execute that skill well, against Antoine Dupont.
Yes.
How the hell do you do it? In this style of defence specifically, is it a case of everybody has an individual onus on tackling until it's on Dupont? We have to put 2 people against him, a left and a right, a high and a low. What do you reckon?
I have absolutely no idea.
That is exactly the answer I was hoping you were going to say, because I have no idea either.
I have absolutely no idea. Because you've kind of got 2 options, right? One is you shift your defence a little bit around the ruck and you try and stand off a little bit so you've got time to react to everything. Or the other is you really, really pressure him. And I feel like that is probably what England will look to do, is to put as much pressure on Dupont as possible. But he thrives off that. How often do we see him, for Toulouse in particular, but for France in years gone by, be hit by a tackle that should shut him down, and any of a scrum half will get absolutely smashed and probably lose the ball from. He rides that tackle, breaks out of it, comes round and opens up a gap and scores a try or puts someone through. Or does a cross kick to the other side of the pitch where the winger's open and waiting.
Also, part of this probably explains why neither of us are international defence coaches, but also...
That is the only reason, though. This is the only reason.
Yes, but both of those things you've just said, to me, that just says that opens up more for the forward pack, right? Yeah. That there's a very real possibility.
But this is why the Noir play is so useful.
Yeah.
Because it opens up space for Dupont.
Yeah.
And for Untermatt, particularly on the fringes around that.
But there's a very realistic world where Dupont doesn't do that much in this game.
Yes.
Because they're watching him so heavily. The pack
Same
then
with
just do everything and take everything on themselves. And then, Jalabert does something ludicrous 60 minutes in, and then suddenly everyone's going like, you know what, I've not really noticed Dupont today. And that's fine. It's just the eyes that are on him is already making an impact, at which point Le Garrett can come on and rip up, whatever gaps they're then suddenly leaving out when they leave a bit more space. It's such an interesting conundrum because, we have no idea how to stop Antoine Dupont. It's kind of the basic question of rugby punditry is say, so how do you stop Antoine Dupont? None of us know the answer.
No.
That's real pundits, that's people like us who are putting stupid stuff on YouTube and taking a guess at what rugby players are actually trying to do on the pitch, right? None of us know what the answer to that. No one has figured it out because no one's properly done it yet.
Including professional teams.
Yeah, exactly.
Including international analysts and head coaches.
Like, the All Blacks is the one that everyone goes to shut down. They still lost that game. They're still not satisfied with what they did to stop Antoine Dupont.
Yeah.
Like, yeah. And I don't want this to always just be about him, but because that whole French team deserve credit. And it is one of those that if England were playing against kind of like a so-called Tier 2 team that had Antoine Dupont playing 9 for them, right, it would be a much easier task, right? But instead, we are at the point where they have that pack. If you're stopping Antoine Dupont, good for you. You're not stopping Manny Miafu.
It's the classic Joe Lomu in the 90s problem that if you put too much focus on him, the rest of the All Blacks rip you apart, except this team's got Damien Penaud. Who is also that player. And I think even more so than the likes of Untermack and Ramos, Penaud is a guy who can try out of absolutely nothing if you don't mark him properly.
Ramos will give him the ball.
Yeah.
Jalibert will give him the Bielbiaré the ball.
Yeah. So I think France are the most difficult team in the world to defend.
Yeah.
I also think, though, England are quickly becoming one of the best defences in the world. And I know they're conceding points still and they conceded a lot of tries. But it's this weird thing because I really like their defence because their defence gets them momentum and gets them on top of the game and gets them running the match.
Agree.
And that is the really exciting thing. And I would personally, and this is a preference thing, prefer that and prefer watching that and prefer that if I was a coach or I was a player even, to a defence that's merely containing, but it's perhaps maybe you hold out more tries, but this is overall giving England a better chance to win the game, I believe, firmly, than a defence that maybe concedes one fewer tries because it doesn't, as you said, you slip off something and it doesn't quite work. Then a defence is so aggressive and wins you turnovers, wins you the ball back and pushes teams back 15, 20 metres.
I'm aware this has mainly been me asking you questions, mainly about France, right? So I want to flip that on its head because my next question was going to be, right, with all that in mind, how do England win this game?
Yeah.
And I think you've just answered part of that question. It's because the defence isn't merely to contain
I think that's
France.
it. I think it's
to feed their kicking game, to feed their attacking game and create these unstructured scenarios which Marcus Smith thrives on. If you find yourself in a confined environment, right, guess what? Finn Smith bloody loves that. Right, he loves getting his team out of those scenarios and then kicking 50-22s and everything.
The biggest factor we haven't talked about, though, is the fact that France only gave away 3 penalties at the weekend against Wales. And one of those was a turnover jackal by Tommy Reffel, and one of those was the red card for Roman Untermack. So really, they only gave away 1 unforced penalty in the entire match, which is absurd numbers. It won't be the same again, but that does take out what I would say is England's big thing, which is I think you kick every goal. Yeah. You take the points every chance there's on offer because France are going to score bullshit points, but you've got to stay in that game as long as you can. And you've got to be in a position where if something falls for you, if you get a lucky break, if you get a lucky try, if something opens up like you did for the Murley try last week, then you take it, suddenly you're within 7 points. It's just trying to stay in that game in the way England are so good at. England is so good at staying in games for 65, 70 minutes, and then perhaps there's been a drop-off. And what they need to be doing is just keep buying tickets for that lottery for those last 10 minutes and making sure they're in there because one of these days it is going to click against one of these big teams. There
will be moments where, your Ben Earl comes up with a massive jackal turnover that keeps them in the game, that swings momentum and so on. Those moments will happen, It sounds like, because we've talked about how many undefendable players there are on the French team, it sounds like this is just trying to write England off. Not at all.
No.
Not at all, because their defence as a unit is so aggressive, so physical, so capable of winning those big turnovers, those big moments. They will always be in the fight, I think even if France are much the more dominant team, I think this game will not be won by more than 10 points in either direction.
There is, though, a chance that France turn up and do what they did last time they came to Twickenham. There is 50 points.
There is
still that chance remaining.
They have Antoine Dupont playing for them.
They have Thomas Ramos.
They have Louis Bielbiaré.
Yeah.
They have Mathieu Jalibert.
They have Alexander Roma.
They do, yeah.
Are we just listing players? Jordan Colombe's on the bench.
I mean, Peter Mavaka's there.
Peter Mavaka's there. We haven't talked about Peter Mavaka at all. No. And he is the most bullshit hooker. Yeah. So I think that brings us through broadly everything about this game. I am excited. I think this could be one of the games of the tournament. I think it's set up to be. Every advantage has been given to the most likely underdog of this tournament in England. They are the underdog who's most likely to cause an upset against one of the, the bigger teams, the more traditionally successful teams. And they've been given every advantage to try and beat the tournament favourites here. So either we get to see France in their pomp or we get a big upset. I think that's hugely exciting.
This is guaranteed to be a banger, this game, no matter what. So before we go, first and foremost, right, At fullback, would you rather they picked Marcus Smith or the Cookie Crisp Wolf?
The Cookie Crisp Wolf is taller.
Yeah, he is.
Yeah.
He's a bit bigger.
He's a bit bigger, a bit more physically in the air. Jumps very high as well.
This episode is not sponsored by Cookie Crisp.
Looks like a fullback. Tastes like one too. But it's a fly half.